Well, good evening. The hour being after 7:30, I will call the August 30th school committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can you give us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's with great sadness that I have to introduce the second order of business for this evening. A week ago, a beloved member of the Walpole High School community and a longtime worker in the Walpole Public Schools, Jeffrey Mattson, passed away from a heart attack unexpectedly. He had been a custodian at Walpole High School for many years. He'd been involved in a number of things in our community. He'd been an election warden, one of our polling locations, and he was a man of particular gentleness and kindness who had a great rapport with a great many of our students. And so now we will begin our meeting with a moment of silence for him. Thank you. We move on to new business, the out-of-state field trip request.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have Tim Giblin, teacher at the high school, and also Walpole High School cross-country team coach, who will inform the committee of a out-of-state trip for the track team to Goddard Park in Warwick, Rhode Island. Mr. Giblin.
I'd like to request permission for the boys cross-country team to attend the Ocean State Cross-Country Invitational, Goddard Park in Warwick, Rhode Island, on Saturday, September 22nd. We've run this meet 3 times before, in 2008, 2010, and 2016. It'll afford our team the opportunity to compete against top competition. The reason why I didn't ask for permission earlier was because oftentimes the date of these meets don't become apparent until over the summer, and as there are no school committee meetings over the summer, this is the earliest opportunity.
So the first motion I would recommend is a recommendation to waive the 30-day notice requirement regarding out-of-state field trips.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Gallivan, a second by Mrs. Muccini. Brown-Sword, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 6-0-0.
Second motion I'd recommend is for the varsity track team under the coaching of Timothy Giblin, be allowed to travel to Warwick, Rhode Island. There'll be 2 coaches, and the entry fee will be about $90 per student.
$90 total for the team.
$90 total. I like that number even better. How many students, Mr. Giblin?
7.
7. Okay. And so I would recommend approval.
May I have a motion to approve?
I'd make a motion to approve the field trip for September 22nd to the Goddard Park in Warwick, Rhode Island.
I have a motion by Mrs. Gallivan, a second by Mrs. Muccini Brown-Sword. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 6-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing
Thank you.
it, too.
Thanks for coming
It's
out.
a big commitment.
Moving on, we have reappointment of the representative to the Walpole Media TV Committee. I believe we have a motion to table to a date certain.
Yeah, I would just like a little bit more information, so if we could postpone it until the September 13th meeting, that would be helpful.
Excellent. In the form of a motion from Mrs. Gallivan.
Motion to table the appointment until our next meeting.
Excellent. Second. Second by Mr. Marine. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 6-0-0 to table item number 22 until the meeting of September 13th. Moving on, we have a summary of professional development.
So next, as is tradition, we have the assistant superintendent, Dr. Bridget Goff. One of her new responsibilities will be to share with us, the community and the school committee the professional development activities that our professional faculty has participated in over the summer months. So, Dr. Goff.
Good evening. This summer, we had approximately 90 staff members who participated in developing curriculum projects over the summer. That's in your packet. I believe those are the last 3 pages in your packet. It's entitled Summer R&D. Many projects. They range from developing math units and revamping common formative and summative assessments, working on the AP psychology curriculum, syllabus and assessments, curriculum development for English language learners, and also all 3 levels focused on social emotional learning for R&D projects. For example, the elementary created lesson plans to support what's known as CASTLE, and that's Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. The middle school had a social emotional learning focus group, and they worked as a team to develop coherent school-wide district social programming. And even the high school, the school counselors came together to enhance the school counseling curriculum. During the week of August 20th, we had new staff participate in a 4-day training. This past Monday, we had our K-1 teachers who took part in Foundations training. That's this multisensory language-based program that focuses on critical foundation skills. And grades 2 through 5 participated in what's known as Freckle training, and that focused on assessment and intervention support. Tuesday morning, the entire middle school science department received training on what's called STEM scopes, and that's a student-centric blended STEM learning curriculum, and that combines some digital resources and supplemental prints and some hand-on kits for to keep pace with our next generation science standards. And Tuesday afternoon, Charlie Applestein presented to the entire Walpole Public School District. His presentation is in conjunction with our Safe School initiatives to focus on meeting the needs of the individual child. He really focused on strength-based practice and the power of positive attitude and culture, and he is the author of a book, No Such Thing as a Bad Kid, and Nancy Gallivan was able to view that training for the entire session, so thank you, Nancy, for coming and supporting us. Additionally, many staff members took part in courses and workshops during the summer. You have a list of the entire PD that staff participated in the entire year, but in the summer, there were approximately 70. 26 teachers participated in what's called Responsive Classroom, and that's an evidence-based approach to teaching that focuses on a strength between academic skills and social and emotional learning. And we really feel like, and you all know that it's important to build a continuous culture of learning. It directly impacts student achievement, and providing these ongoing opportunities for educators really enable them to improve their pedagogy, their knowledge, their skills, their good teaching practices, so they in turn can help the students. And we all know that learning is a lifelong process, and it impacts student growth and learning for all of our students. And I commend the staff for utilizing these past 2 months for taking advantage of these learning opportunities.
Dr. Goff, can you speak to the early release program we're planning this year, or maybe Dr. Kenny could, and what the focus is for all the early release professional
Yeah, there's
development?
different focuses, and we can talk about that. For example, and we're going to focus on science for the elementary schools, so all of the early release days will be focused on science training to align with our next generation science standards, to really look at the practices. And even though a teacher may not teach specifically science as you get up into 5th grade, there are a lot of practices that really apply to all of the subject areas, being able to defend your argument, to be able to develop what good questions are. So they're really important in those practices. Middle schools are really going to focus on some inclusive practices, and also take a look and continue with their PLCs depending on the different content area. For example, in high school and middle school, as you may be aware, the social studies, we're coming into new frameworks that need to be implemented in 3 years. So we're going to be looking at a social studies task force throughout the elementary, middle, and high school, taking a closer look at that in terms of planning and implementation. English language arts, they're going to be looking at writing, and also taking a look at some strong foundational skills throughout. So there's a lot that we're going to be working on throughout the early releases, and that's just gleaming the surface.
Right.
And we're not going to forget about math, Nancy. We're all good with math. We're focusing on that too, because we have our math coaches at the middle schools and at the elementary schools too as well. Yes. And the research project, the math for instructional teachers, for secondary teachers, they're going to be focusing on that as well at the high school level. So all 3 levels will be focusing on math.
Mrs. Gayotis.
I think that's great, and it's helpful for you to update us on what they do on those days, especially for the general community, because I know parents are often scrambling when you have 2 parents working jobs to find coverage those days. So to know what they're actually finding coverage for, I think, is a great thing, and I think that's fantastic that we're,
Yeah, we'll continue
using
to
it
do
wisely.
that. And what's interesting is there's so many competing interests that we're trying to really make sure that we maximize the time, and we have to prioritize of what our needs are and looking at where we're going.
Thank you.
Mrs. Callaghan.
I just had 2 questions. I was looking at the R&D projects for over the summer, and at some point in the future, I'd be interested in learning about what the STEM Academy is doing. I know it graduated the first group of kids last year, and I've heard that maybe the interest is dwindling, but I was glad to see that that was an R&D.
Yeah, we can give you an update on that.
That would
Sure.
be good. And the other one is the health, wellness, and PE. I didn't see an R&D project for that, but I'm sure that work is going on because that's, I'm sure, changing a lot
Yes.
as we're increasing the requirements. So if you could, in the future, let us know about both of those, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have the ratification of side letter of agreement between the Walpole Teachers Association.
Yes, I'm recommending that the school committee consider ratifying side letter of agreement between the Walpole Teachers Association and the Walpole School Committee. In essence, the agreement approves for a 1-year period of time an 8-period schedule and an 8-day cycle for Walpole High School. The purpose of the agreement is to provide more opportunities for students to select courses that they desire, and we have found that to be the immediate outcome. We're very pleased with how the schedule has gone so far. So I would just remind the committee it is for a 1-year period and that we will need to address documenting and memorializing the schedule in the collective bargaining agreement as we begin embark on negotiations in most likely January. So I would recommend ratification.
I know, to speak for some of our colleagues, we're very grateful to President Cuzzy and Dan Mullaney for their work with us very productively outside of the normal contract negotiations to bring wider opportunities for our students. And this was a lot of hard work by a lot of people to get this, and so we're quite grateful. Mrs. Callahan.
Dr. Lynch, can you just explain the basics of it? The kids can sign up for 8 periods, and they attend 6 per day, is that right?
The teachers teach 6 per day, are assigned 6 per day, so they'll have a prep period and a collaboration period. And then the students can sign up for, my understanding is up to 8. Now, some of those may be a study hall.
Correct.
You may have where additional health classes involved that are available for students to sign into. We also have additional English classes, Mandarin, so we're trying to expand the program. And when you have more periods per day, there's less conflict with, say, band or foreign language when it comes to the AP classes, when the AP classes are, or any other classes, but.
And so they don't attend 8 classes each day. I've heard that they drop 2 each day, and then, can you explain that part of it, or
Maybe.
is that?
Maybe Dr. Canny can. I don't want to mislead.
So it's an 8-day cycle instead of a 7-day cycle, and the students take 6 out of the 8 each day. Included in the 6 each day may be a directed study or an intervention period. The goal of the 6 periods per day is so that the students can then have targeted intervention guidance or support similar to the extensions program at the middle school, but it will be taught by the content specific teacher and not necessarily by someone who's assigned as a study period. There will be some study periods, and one of the reasons for that was to minimize some of the stress for the students. But the targeted intervention periods, each teacher is assigned to an intervention period. It's not planning. It's not, they don't have to prep and plan for another course, but they need to work directly with students who are having some difficulty in the course.
It sounds like a good idea.
It's
I'm
a
just
very
trying to
good idea.
understand the logistics of it. First day, they go to periods 1 through 6, then day
Then
number 2 starts with
with-
7 and 8, 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Very, very similar to the way it's done now, where one period has dropped. The other change is that instead of having a 68-minute period, there is a 57-minute period, which has caused a little bit of concern among the lab teachers. However, given the additional intervention period and a study period, those opportunities should be able to be addressed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Excellent. May I have a motion to ratify?
Motion to ratify the side letter regarding the 8-period day.
Motion by Mr. Breen. Second by Mrs. Muccini Brownsword. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Excellent. Next we have, under old business, our Safe School Initiative update. As many of those listening at home and,
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have one more item under new business.
oh, there you go.
Number 5,
Fair
vote to
enough.
accept capital
I
recommendations.
thought we were going a little fast. Christian just wanted me to get through this, that's why. He's like,
Yeah.
I go home.
Yeah.
A vote to accept updated capital recommendation.
Right, so why don't I start with the smaller capital items and end with the feasibility study, if that's okay with the committee. Let's review something. Okay, so, to give you a little context, the town administrator has asked us to accelerate our capital improvement request this year so that the money is expended in the fall and that the money is put to use this year as opposed to the spring. The spring, it allowed us more time to meet with our department heads, with Mr. Fisher, with Mr. Anderson, with our principals. This year was more difficult and more of a challenge because normally we meet with the department heads, principals, reach consensus. I recommend to the school committee who reaches consensus. Then we go to capital, then we go to the finance committee, and then we go to the town meeting. This year, because of schedules, we've already met with the capital Tuesday night with our best, Mr. Fisher and I's best guess, with a strict caveat saying that this is up for a vote Thursday night with the school committee. So we looked at our previous requests. We looked at what are hot button issues, what are important to our students, and we tried to make a recommendation. So this year, for this fall, the recommendation, we originally had recommended $125,000 for Chromebooks to develop equity across the elementary school and to start a replacement program. The town administrator came back and he recommended $95,000. We've since had time to speak with all the principals since actually the packet went out. That's how much accelerated this is. And we think that school security, we should have an item in here for school security. So I went to Mr. Fisher, we inventoried all the stairwells and additional open areas that we feel need surveillance cameras that we had identified last year as a priority. And we're asking, instead of requesting 95,000 in Chromebooks, that we request 50,000 for school security upgrades and 45,000 in Chromebooks. That would allow us to develop equity in our schools, and Mr. Frisch and I will develop a plan for a replacement program for 5, 6, 7-year-old Chromebooks in the rest of the district. We feel that 50,000 will cover all the stairwells, which are important, and some other areas that we have a lack of coverage. And we also feel that 45,000 is a good at least phase one, and potentially come back next year to finish that phase. We're not looking for one-to-one at the elementary level. We're not looking to have students take home Chromebooks at the elementary level, although some do for special reasons. We feel that the 6th grade has enough Chromebooks in-house to provide a Chromebook for every 6th grader during the day. And we also feel that this will help with our scheduling of MCAS online testing, so that these Chromebooks won't be taken from classrooms and diverted to testing for a 45-day cycle every year. So I just think that this will be a request that will help all schools and all students in one way or the other. So I would recommend 45,000 in Chromebooks, 55,000 for an athletic extracurricular minibus, and Mr. Fisher will explain that, and 45,000. I'm sorry, 50,000 for school safety and security upgrades and expansion. So, Mr. Frisch, if you wouldn't mind bringing that request forward.
So the second item on the, or third now, on the capital list would be what they call multifunctional school activity bus. And I have handouts I can give you that we presented to Capital the other night. It's in effect a miniature bus of sorts that transports about between 13 and 14 students. And the vehicle is unique in that it does not have to be driven by somebody with a 7D or a CDL license, a special license. It can be, and it's designed for being driven by a coach, a teacher, a club leader, those individuals who could drive their own group to an activity, to a sporting event. The RMV has carved out this particular type of vehicle. It could be used for athletics primarily. That's the real focus of it. That's where the savings would come in, but also for clubs and extracurricular activities, for transportation during the day, for field trips, whether in district or out of district. Very versatile vehicle, we have a lot of opportunities to use it. When it comes to athletics, we're confident we could use it at least 5 days a week, and in some cases 6 or 7, depending on activities on the weekend. So it would be a vehicle that would virtually be used every day. This isn't something unique to Walpole. This is something that surrounding towns already own at least one of, in some cases 2 or 3. And their plan, and my proposal with the athletic director as well, is to try to reduce the amount of athletic transportation that we are paying for. So if you recall on this budget year, 2019, FY 2019, you as a school committee supported the athletic department by increasing their transportation budget by $22,500. The rationale was you felt it was important, the boosters clubs felt it was important, we all felt it was important to provide transportation to every athletic event so that no student would have to drive or parents would have to drive. It's a significant liability that we're concerned about. So this vehicle could play a role in that as well, in streamlining our transportation and hopefully getting back that $22,500 back into the budget in another way, being used in other means, and then further reducing it if down the road we were able to acquire a second vehicle, which we can talk about at a later date. But the estimates for the savings are about almost $25,000 a year in savings. The vehicle costs about high $50,000 to $60,000. So in roughly 3 years, we would own the vehicle. Obviously, if we received it from capital funding, we wouldn't have to worry about recouping that, but it would go a long way, as I said, to helping reduce the athletic transportation budget. To give you a perspective on athletic trips, a local trip to a town such as Norwood, Medfield, Foxborough, very close, Canton. Those trips are $350 per day per bus. So every time a bus leaves here, that's the fee that we're paying. And those can rise as much as $600 if we're traveling down to the Cape. That doesn't include $75 an hour for the driver to sit and wait if that's what we request for a longer athletic event. Doesn't even include gas. So these are very expensive trips. And I think this van would go a long way to preventing us from paying some of that. Since I brought up the second vehicle, if we were able to acquire a second vehicle, we could reduce our operating budget expense of transportation by up to 50%, saving us about $45,000 a year in transportation. With one vehicle, it's about 25% of the budget. If you think of the budget as about $100,000 for transportation. So, just trying to think of anything I didn't include. We could transport most of our smaller teams. So if you think of gymnastics, cheer, swim, some of those teams probably transport the entire team with one vehicle. Once you introduce a second vehicle, which I'm seeing other towns doing, now you're moving an entire team, and now you're chipping away at that 350 to 600 per trip. So it is a pretty advantageous thing to do, I feel, and we've done our homework on it, and other towns have as well. So be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mrs. Gallion.
I just think it's a great idea. I think that, you know, you've proven to us that you know what you're doing. So I think it's a great idea.
We have the, I should mention that you just reminded me, the staff member that we have on for Kim Poirier is her name. She's our transportation coordinator. She handles yellow buses. She handles all of our special ed vans. She does a fantastic job. She would also manage this in consultation with Ron Dowd, obviously the athletic director, Ken Gable. I didn't even mention music trips, but we're trying to grow our music program. This would be an opportunity to do that as well. The other thing I should mention is we could still use this vehicle and add in a couple of vans, special ed vans, if it's off hours, and now we can still move entire teams because this is a 13 or 14 passenger vehicle. So it's a lot of different things we're considering if we're able to get the vehicle.
I noticed that van program replacement was something that we were considering as well. Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So, as you've heard, we've built a special ed transportation program over the years. We have not come to the town except for one vehicle. Our initial vehicle was a capital-sponsored vehicle, paid-for vehicle. Since then, we used McKinney-Vento funding for homeless transportation for one other vehicle, and then all the others, and we have about 18 of them, have been purchased out of savings. So we look at a route, we realize we can do it ourselves, we take that route back, purchase a vehicle, and generally by the end of the year, we own the vehicle and we've paid for the vehicle, and then we move on to another route. And we just do that over time. We've kind of hit a point where we feel like to go beyond wouldn't be advantageous, but what we have in-house and that level we're at really works well. So we'll continue that, but we have not in the past gone to capital for replacement of these vehicles. So I'm now hitting the end of useful life for some of those vehicles we bought originally. So that original proposal was looking to the town to pay for one or two vehicles and start to help us replace them, because now I'm not recouping savings, I'm just preventing costs. And I can't pay for vehicles out of preventing costs.
So just in terms of prioritizing, you know, moving Chromebooks down to the elementary level was never something that we talked about for this year. I'm just wondering, you know, if you, and I'm guessing you thought about this, but how you would prioritize between replacing the vans and that. We're getting savings out of the van program replacement, which makes sense to me. So that's why I'm asking the question.
So an honest answer to your question is working with the special education budget, can find the resources to buy hopefully one this year and maybe get through to next year and reconsider the capital again, proposal again. I would rather do that. I would prefer to see those Chromebooks in students' hands and
Okay.
try to figure out how to get those vehicles through, even if I use building rental, or I use other sources of funding that we get from renting our spaces or renting buildings and doing that kind of thing to pay for some of that funding or the special education budget.
Okay.
Bless you.
Mrs. Gallivan.
My question has to do with the school security. You were saying 50,000 for cameras, essentially. Were there any other things that came out of the other buildings when, I know in the springtime you put together the building-specific safety teams. And did those people have a chance to weigh in on anything that was a high priority from their point of view?
They did. I got some feedback from Stephen Embush. I think in my next point that I make when we talk about the Safe Schools Initiative, you'll hear some of the things that we've done. If I were to balance out or weigh out what priorities rose from the conversations I had with the principals, I would say the cameras are number one, especially at the high school and the middle schools. There were other initiatives, but they weren't, I just don't see them as preventative or helpful on a day-to-day basis. And I also think it's something that I could do through our own means, through our building rental account, knock off some of the smaller expensed items, whereas I can't fund $50,000 for cameras. We've done some, but I can't come close to that on a yearly basis.
Mike, wasn't there a request for like a swipe card system that was very expensive?
So, yes, there was a request from Fisher School. Some of the teachers were concerned that their building doesn't have access control, so that there's a window of time when the teachers are coming in that the doors are open and then they're closed right after that. When we did an estimate through Lantel, the company we use for most of our security needs, it was about $75,000 for Fisher School alone. So that would be, I think, an initiative unto itself, and it would warrant a larger capital expenditure to put that system in multiple schools and, you know, to try to balance out. Some schools have it, some don't use it. It's just kind of a hit or miss. Some of the newer buildings like Elm and Boyden that were renovated more recently, those have systems. And so we would want to try to look at the district as a whole and make a really informed decision about doing access control. It's very, very expensive.
Is it true that the governors during the summertime put forward a budget that allowed schools to apply for some safety money?
Yes, there's a webinar on September 11th, I believe it is. We're participating in that webinar, and it's for some personnel and for some safety equipment too. That could be an initiative we look at, where the state would come in and fund such a large ticket item. I mean, we're talking about $500,000.
I'd be interested in both, like, you know, getting an idea of what you know of already, but
Yeah.
what you can learn from the individuals in the buildings, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's two different things. But maybe in the fall we can hear from you about that and keep it in mind, because the safety stuff obviously is
Sure.
a priority too.
Absolutely.
Mike, can you talk about the last phone system that has to be replaced too at Old Post Road? Wasn't that $20,000?
Sure, the last item
Yeah.
on here. Yeah, so we have a $20,000 item on here for Old Post Road. For those of you who don't remember, we began this phone program probably about 4 years ago at this point, and it's taken us 4 capital rounds to get to this point. We've replaced all the phone systems, including central office, up to date. On this list is the final school, which is Old Post Road. It's about $20,000 to replace that system. That would bring everyone online on the same system. You can 4-digit dial, but more importantly, in the case of an emergency, anyone throughout that building, in any classroom, any part of the building can do a PA announcement to put the school in lockdown, can call 911. The systems are redundant with cable, like a voice over internet phone primarily, but they also have cable lines going, or copper lines going into them as backup. So a very redundant system. We're very happy with the the phones that, and the systems that are in the schools now. So we're looking forward to finishing this project off and moving on to other infrastructure type of programs.
Mrs. Kansas.
This kind of goes along with what Nancy was asking about the security. That meeting we had with the police, and we were talking about, different measures and different things to secure. And I know we talked a lot about the cameras and the stairwells, which you mentioned. So will that 50,000 cover all of those areas that we view to be, high priority because of, we were talking about with bullying and this bullying initiative, that a lot of incidents happen in hallways and places where kids know there aren't cameras. I was just thinking, if the whole school was more or less covered and students knew that, that would be a real deterrent. So after we expend this 50,000, would we be more or less covered, or are there still areas we're looking at?
It's a big school.
Okay.
I think a new school has, I think you probably know better than me, but
120.
over 200 cameras,
Yeah.
right, in a new building. So for me to tell you that the entire building is under surveillance, I don't think that would be accurate. What I said to Stephen today when I spoke to him about the high school in particular is, can we knock off those areas where you've had issues in the past, that you feel like kids are aware of, that there's no camera there, and that could be susceptible to issues like stairways, certain blind corners, depending on the structure of the building. And we're not just talking about middle school, high school. I also talked to the middle schools. But Stephen felt comfortable that this would be a nice step in the right direction as far as covering the stairways we talked about in the past, as well as a few spots in the hallways. Wouldn't cover the entire building. To do the entire building, I would have to, they're about $1,700 a camera, and then I would have to go through the building with Stephen and find every single spot that's off of that and come up with an estimate to really accurately answer your question. But it would resolve the areas that have historically been a problem in the building.
Okay, ballpark idea though. If you wanted to cover everything, you're saying there are 200-ish cameras. How many would we be at if we added these?
There are 200 cameras in a new high school building.
Okay.
How many in the high school alone?
Yeah.
We'd probably have to add, I would say conservatively, if you wanted full coverage, 20 to 25 more cameras at $1,700 a piece. So maybe another 50,000 would cover the entire building.
Okay.
I think we have to be clear that we wouldn't put cameras in classrooms, obviously restrooms, private area, locker rooms. So when you say the entire building, you're talking about public areas.
Right.
And the other thing to consider is the outside as well. So I had a conversation with Ed Connor today about the playground area at Byrd Middle School. It's a nice, the kids kind of stay in an area that would be viewable through a camera. But then if you look at Johnson, they're spread out at recess. So it really depends on the buildings. In this last round that we just finished of installations, we added a couple of exterior cameras at the high school where that courtyard is in the middle there, that kind of U-shaped area where you come into the gym from outside. That was an open area Stephen was concerned about. We took care of that. And then we took care of probably 4 other areas within the building that he was concerned about. But we weren't able to get to the staircases that we talked about because we had to, again, it was a different time back then, but it was, we had to draw the line, and that's where we drew the line. So this next round, this 50,000 would cover those other areas.
I guess I would personally like to, that to me, just given everything, that's on the news that happens and given what's happened with bullying incidents, to me, that's a high priority item, is making sure that we have all that covered. So I would personally like to see more money go towards that. It's great that we're putting some money towards it, but, as we're beginning to discuss where to, and it is complicated because normally we have these discussions in the spring and then we have a little more time to give ideas and kind of brainstorm. But to me, like, security and making sure that we have everything covered is a big priority. So I just feel strongly about that.
I understand.
Mrs. Gallavale.
One more. You reminded me of that meeting that we had soon after the Parkland shooting. And one of the issues was the fire alarms going off in an extreme case. So again, not looking for an answer right now, but as we talk about next phases of safety, you know, I know that the fire chief was gonna look into, is there a way to override, or is there a legal way to override it? Because typically there wasn't. So can you just add that to the list
Absolutely.
for, you know, hearing about it sometime this fall?
Yeah.
That's probably
Thank you.
one of the most challenging questions that
Exactly.
you're asking, is how do we overcome a fire alarm and trump it with a lockdown?
In an extreme situation, yeah.
And I think the feasibility study, at least for the high school and the two middle schools, we can add this question to the feasibility study. What would it take to bring all three schools up to an acceptable level of surveillance?
And what's the
And then we
norm
could use
in
it
a
as a
new
capital
building?
item too.
You know, what becomes the norm if you build a building?
I think you'll get more information in the next update when we talk about the safety initiative. We'll
Okay.
provide more.
So,
Anyone else?
we've covered Chromebooks, we've covered the minibus, we've covered
Phones.
school security and phones, so let's talk about Chromebooks and what the 45,000 will cover. Ann?
So, I think our priority is going to be more on the replacements. We have 750 Chromebooks that have reached an auto expiration date. And what that means is that through the Google platform, these devices were purchased, they were the first purchases that we made, the device purchase. And Google estimates how long they can support that particular operating system. This particular device had 2 gig of RAM, and the standard for MCAS testing, the standard for any new Chromebooks coming out is 4 gig. And this batch of Chromebooks is now faced with this auto expiration date from Google. And what that means is as Google continues to develop Android for, they're combining their Chrome and Android under one umbrella. When that rolls out, it's an unknown. We don't know how long the device will, as these updates come through, will continue to operate with the programs that we use for it, the web-based programs. So we need to develop, in the big picture, we need to develop a sustainability plan for all of the Chromebooks, not just the one-to-one programs that we're rolling out now for grades 7 through 12, but also a replacement cycle that takes that into account. And the growth of, at the elementary level and up through grade 6, where devices are accessible to each classroom kind of on demand, rather than a shared cot, shared cots among many grades or a few grades where they have to schedule the use of the technology. The train has left the station with digital learning, and so many of our programs are digital. A new math program, the investment that we've made with training our teachers, these programs are accessible. It's an expectation at this point. So that said, what will $45,000 buy? Depending on what the fall pricing comes out to. Right now, they're about $200. We're expecting an increase this year in the price, but we would distribute them. There's at the elementary level, there's 341 of the 750 Samsung devices that we would start to target. We also want to equalize. Our 4 elementary schools have largely funded their Chromebook purchases through the benefactor of PAC. So we would have to try to equalize, starting with like grade 5 and down. And a couple of schools already have a cart per classroom that's readily accessible at grade 5 and in grade 4. We need to get that down really to grade 2 so our students are actively participating in the programs that are personalizing their learning, helping their learning. And as Link mentioned, the MCAS, rather than disrupting the whole school for that 45-day MCAS window, enabling the continuous access to these. So we'll see what the numbers come out to be.
Further questions? Mrs. Gallivan.
You mentioned the idea of needing to think about replacing them eventually.
Yeah.
I was just curious about, in rough numbers, what percentage of our Chromebooks have been bought within the last 18 months?
So I actually looked that up. We transitioned our inventory system last summer. So I have, I think, reasonable data from
I'm
a
not
year.
looking for exact. I'm
Not
just looking
18
ballpark.
months. And over this past year, we've purchased 2,000 devices. Of that, there's 880 some odd at the high school, 600-ish at the middle schools, and then combined elementary, maybe 600 for all, among all 4 elementaries. If you're doing the math and that doesn't tell you the 2,000, it's a rough number. I'm looking at the individuals.
But I'm just trying to
schools.
get a sense of, is that
Yep.
half of all the Chromebooks that we
About
own?
half of the Chromebooks we had in our inventory, and again, that inventory number would include those 750 older units that we're looking to replace. So accounting for that, yeah.
Okay. No, it's just something to keep in mind, because 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 6 years from now, we don't want to be hit with it all at once, ideally.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Gaudens.
Just in terms of replacement, and you were mentioning that it had been funded by the PAC, like a lot of the technology at the elementary level. So was any of that purchased by the schools, or was it all?
No, I
by the
wouldn't say
PACs?
all. I think some schools purchase them on. I don't have that financial data from the ordering system tied to my system, so, and schools place the orders individually, so I don't have an accurate count on that.
I think it would be good too to reach out to the PACs too if this is an initiative we're undertaking, just because there's choices as to where they expend resources, and if certain schools are making choices, and
Right.
it would be helpful for them to be able to work with you on
Yeah.
this.
And I think by and large they have, but not every, the 4 elementary school PACs are, there's definitely differences in the fundraising efforts and where that PAC feels the funds should be targeted and with the money that they do get. And so, yeah. Okay.
Further questions?
Just
Mr. Johnson.
on your point, I think I remember at a meeting, Mrs. Duggan saying that they had received a lot towards Chromebooks and to give some of the other elementaries more of the money. I think that's the way they worked. It's just in,
Well,
in fairness.
Right.
yeah, but if PACs are expending money on technology, not realizing that the entire district will be paying, I think it's nice to have that information before they're voting on what to spend the money on, is all I'm saying. If this is an initiative we're undertaking, and we're gonna be working on replacing them district-wide, there's other things you could do in your school with that money. So I just feel like we should be transparent and kind of reach out to the PACs and have that conversation before they're voting on how to spend money.
Further questions? Mrs. Gallivan.
I'm just making sure I totaled it up right. I have $170,000 for the total request, is that right?
Okay, so we have, to summarize, Chromebooks, this is my recommendation, what the will of the committee may differ. Chromebooks, 45,000. Transportation minibus, 55,000. Old Post Road phone system replacement, 20,000. School security cameras, 50,000. Right?
Great, then I would make a motion to approve the $170,000 request for the fall 2018 capital budget.
Can I ask one question before, do we need to vote on this tonight without?
You need, no, short answer. The process will be, it will go to Capital Tuesday night for a vote, and I think the reason I'm asking the school committee to support these purchases, because it gives us a little more, a lot more cachet when we go to the Capitol to say this is from the school committee, not from the school administration. But we've adjusted votes a half hour before school town meeting that's why we post a meeting before town meeting, so, you know, what's happened in the past is usually the school committee makes a recommendation to the capital committee, finance committee, town meeting. It sometimes gets adjusted along the way depending upon what the town administrator recommends. The town administrator is behind this, but you can adjust your vote.
I just feel like I would rather have more information on the security, the additional security before I voted.
Okay.
I would too, except for the fact that the timing is such, because I looked into it, the timing is such that capital budget is gonna make a recommendation, is gonna vote on next Tuesday night. Just so that their recommendation then goes to the finance committee. The finance committee is gonna vote on September 17th so that they can meet the deadline to get the booklets printed so that they get mailed out. So it doesn't mean that we can't go back and say, we did the best we could, but we were unaware of something that is a safety thing. I think people would understand that if we came back with a safety-related issue and asked for a change at the last minute, but I think we're better off voting tonight based on the schedule. I agree with you. I wanted more
I just am
information.
having a hard time weighing Chromebooks and security, given everything that's been happening.
And it's
I would
difficult.
I'm with
rather
you.
spend it on security personally,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it is difficult. It's an issue that, you know, Mike and I grappled with too, and we talked about, okay, what's been done over the summer?
I
You
can
know,
give you an update on it, that might.
maybe that'll ease your mind a little bit about what we've done through the last capital cycle, to kind of refresh your memory. And also, Mike has a very robust rental program with our buildings, and school security and cameras would be within the definition for expenditures of those incomes. So we could use some of those monies. I know that, how much did you carry over this year, Mike? About 50,000?
Yeah.
So that could be set aside, and we usually use it for a replacement system for custodial equipment, for overages in, say, electricity accounts or something like that. But we could cover money for school security if the committee wanted us to go that way. So there's another pot of money we could maybe use, just an option.
I think it's an option, you know, to consider all options, including the fact that maybe you'll learn something from what the governor is releasing.
Right.
I know it's potentially a competitive thing, but, you know, I just think we have to have safety on our radar screen. Obviously, you guys have it on the radar screen already. It's just a little hard for us to be doing this in this fashion.
Right.
I'd feel comfortable voting tonight on what you are recommending and asking for a safety update before fall town meeting, so that if we have to, we just own up to the fact that we learned more during the month of September or the beginning of October, and we asked town meeting to change it. I think if it's safety related, that's a reasonable way to approach it.
Right, so if you ask town meeting to change it, if you just move money within your request, that's simple.
Right.
Because you don't have to come up with any new money. If you're asking for money beyond this request,
Right.
that becomes more complicated, and we have to identify where that money is, and we'd have to work with the town administrator. And he may have a positive response, or he may not. We don't know. So, I mean, if you wanted to shift money from the minibus to security, or from Chromebooks to security at a later date, you can do that without much.
Okay.
Just by
I'm
vote.
fine with the amount. I
Okay.
just can't say, given the information I have now, that I would prioritize Chromebooks the way it was explained to me here over something that knocks off two issues, safety, you know, from what goes on
Yep,
in bullying.
I agree.
That's two items that are real, I mean, obviously, technology's huge too, but
And further still, we meet before, like 3 days before FinCom does, so there's an opportunity to clarify and refine our request on the meeting of the 13th, and the FinCom motion does become the main motion. So if the committee as a whole is satisfied, with an update, say, on the September 13th meeting, we could give them something that is gonna then be printed in the book and the like.
True.
But, so the capital budget is important, it's a
So can we
great,
vote on the amount, but not necessarily, no, you have to vote on how to spend it.
I think you can change your vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we need
Or
to vote
abstain.
on, yeah, or abstain.
Okay.
You need to vote on
I think
the-
we can vote
on the
for the
breakdown.
amount, and we can allocate, or we can not. But with respect to the capital budget committee, the central vote is gonna be of the finance committee, because that's gonna be the main motion, so I think as long as if we have a clear picture by the 17th, if memory
Yeah.
serves.
That's when the FinCom will vote
that-
on it.
That's
yes.
when the FinCom will vote.
Right, and at that time, you could adjust your amounts.
Right.
And I don't think they'll mind, as long as it doesn't add up to more than 170. But I think we need to be committed to at least the items at this point in time, subject to change. Because if you think about it, when we're going to capital or we're going to finance committee, the expectation is that we receive input from them. And we may be expected to make adjustments. I mean, they may come in and say, we can't give you 55 for a bus, we'll give you 45. We can't give you 50 for security, we'll give you 40. And it has to change. So we usually have to come back anyway to adjust our vote, to vote a final number. It's standard practice within a budget. But if you don't feel you want to put your support behind this breakdown, you obviously can abstain
Or vote no.
or vote no.
Mrs. Galvin?
No, I didn't lose my train of thought. I think that what we can say is that we voted this way, and we had a tremendous amount of discussion based on concerns related to security, and that the school committee asked for some more information about it.
Yep.
But this is our vote, given that, and that we will revisit it if we get more concerning information related to security. And, that's the truth, that's, and that's real life. So I think I feel comfortable doing that.
So I mean, I guess we could make that all part of the minutes, but I guess to make it a motion, we could make the motion contingent upon additional information, if you'd like to do that, with
Yeah,
respect to
we
school
could do that.
security.
I was gonna just make a motion to approve it as it is.
Okay.
And conversationally explain to both other boards
Okay.
that our concern is, do we have enough information about the security? And that,
Excellent.
we may choose to revisit it.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to repeat your motion?
Okay, my motion is to vote to request $170,000 from capital budget this coming fall for the 4 items that were specified. $50,000 for school security, $45,000 for Chromebooks, $20,000 for the Outpost Road phones, and $55,000 for the athletic van.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Gallivan, a second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained, 5-1-0. This is a point of discussion, perhaps, just to put a tickler in the file. It was my understanding after going to capital budget on Tuesday that this is the new normal for when capital will be undertaken, from talking with folks in town. So we may want to, as we move further through the year and start, I think, about 2/3 of the way through, start looking at what we do as a school committee calendar. We may, I know this year we had a school committee meeting before our second workshop, and we dealt with the next item on the agenda. We also got a lot of Kristen's warrants out of the way. But things like a field trip that might have been could have been dealt with a couple weeks ago too. We may want to look at having a meeting in early August as well, just to kind of deal with a couple of these matters, but.
And as administration, I think we'll start in April or May on the capital planning
Yeah.
process. I mean, it takes 4 or 5 months to vet all of this, to get cost estimates, to get input from administrators and committees.
But it's my understanding that the fall town meeting will be where more and more of the capital expenditures will be happening going forward. So, Mrs. Gallivan.
I was gonna say, I think we need to wait to see if that's the case. I mean,
Right.
if that's the case, we would, I don't wanna be writing the book until we know that.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
if there's gonna be expenditures in the spring, we could benefit from that, so I don't wanna
Oh, no,
be-
absolutely,
be,
absolutely.
you know, saying that we know something that I'm not sure of.
Excellent. Next item. 1.5 million?
That's after the, I think we do safe school initiatives first, under old business number 1, and then we'll do the building study.
Isn't the building study a?
Would you like
Part
to
of
do
the-
the building study first?
Oh, I thought it's a capital recommendation, is it?
Yeah, we had it under old business only because we've been talking about it for 3
Well,
years.
we voted on it, so there's no need for a vote there. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, Safe School Initiative. Excellent.
Right.
Well, okay.
Right, and they're separate articles, just to, Mr. Chairman, the
Correct.
capital is under Article 11, and the MSBA feasibility study will be under Article 4, so we'd need a separate vote.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, Safe Schools Initiative update. So as many folks at home listening and following along are aware, in June of this past school year, a group of parents gathered together here and were heard out by the school committee, and the committee has decided to undertake an initiative to look at school safety and social and emotional well-being within our schools. I think over the summer, school administration, the school committee has refocused our attention to the margins of our district. We were looking at those students who may be hurting and maybe having difficulty, and looking at how best to speak to those concerns and those pains, and how best to serve our students and keeping their safety and security at the outset. So this will begin a portion of our meeting over the next few months where we give updates not only of the workings of our school safety initiative, but also sort of pertinent other pieces of our budget, pieces of our policy that are changing, and that we wish to highlight for the wider community's information. To start with, we wanted to just review at the outset. It's a really good time at the beginning of school to review communication guidelines and just how to get in touch with the school department, how to reach out to us, and what the sort of flow chart is for that. And so I'm going to go over briefly a document that we were going to get out to all the schools perhaps tomorrow.
With the
Or
handbooks.
within the handbooks. And I know some other members are going to want to chime in and then about the workings of these small groups over the past the group over the past few months, and then we'll also speak to personnel and capital improvements. So we just want to stress that, number one, at the school committee level, there is a mechanism for those to reach out to us, and it's on our website. Our numbers are there, and there's an email that will blast all 7 of us. So if you feel you have a concern, say about the capital budget, or another initiative of the MSBA proposal, the status of the Johnson Middle School that your child is in, that's the mechanism to get to all of us. And I think we welcome that input on any number of fronts because it's really helpful for our deliberations. But from time to time, parents may wish to bring a problem or a concern to the attention of the appropriate school officials. And to assist parents, we just wanted to go over some guidelines that have been in existence, but I think are important to just to begin with. And any concern regarding a school-related matter should first be raised by the parent with the staff member most directly involved. For instance, questions regarding the content of instructional materials or homework assignments should be raised with the teacher involved. If a matter remains unsolved, the parent may wish to speak with the building principal, and appointments can be scheduled by contacting the office of the principals involved. If this matter continues to remain unresolved, the parent may wish to speak with the superintendent, and for appointment, they can call the superintendent's office, where our delays, as I can speak personally in my own life, when someone may call me in my day job and I have to chase down a state agency, sometimes it's best to call us after things have not worked worked out, which we hope they do. So there's some examples which we'll give out in our e-notes as well of issues which are most appropriately addressed at the levels indicated. So teachers are a great place to talk about student homework assignments, quizzes and tests, course content, instructional materials, academic programs, and extra help. Issues related to the classroom discipline, relationships with other pupils and the teacher, and athletic issues to the teacher and her coach involved, and then onward to the athletic director. Guidance counselors' problems between school and home, teacher and pupil, pupil and other pupils. Professional matters related to student development, behaviors, and interactions with others, principals, any issues arising out of school buildings when no other staff member can be specifically identified, student placement issues, instructional and co-curricular program issues, matters related to the physical plant, complaints, dissatisfaction, and concerns regarding school personnel, student records, school-wide discipline issues, and bus conduct issues. The superintendent, questions regarding school committee policies and administrative procedures, school committee meetings and agenda items, any school system record or document, budgetary matters, hiring and supervision of staff, complaints, dissatisfaction with school personnel and at the principal's level, suggestions or requests for change in the curriculum, and transportation matters. And the school committee matters pertaining to policy, class size, field trips, fundraising activities. Requests specific to courses and programs are included in the program of studies. Complaints regarding the superintendent, school board minutes and agenda items, and budgetary matters. We also take high praise. But I think we want to express profoundly to the community that over the summer we feel strongly that our staff and our administrators do a good job, but we have stressed to them to reorientate themselves on a compassionate footing, to hear your concerns and to be responsive as they very often are. And in an instance where it is not, the district has committed itself to remedy that and to be better, as I think we can always be better, just as we want our students to be better. But I think this is a helpful beginning for folks who have concerns, to understand where best to begin those concerns, and if they're having difficulty, where to go up the ladder if need be. And we want to hear from folks, and so I think that's a very important piece of that. Going forward, I think probably we have a personnel update and a capital update pertaining to this initiative, but maybe some of my colleagues would like to chime in about the sort of experiences they've had in the two productive meetings we've had over the summer at this time. I think most of us have been at most of them. Some takeaways, Mrs. Gallivan.
One thing I would add to what you were just talking about, Bill, is that we've talked about the fact that people would like to get information instantaneously. Mm-hmm. And we've sort of come to the agreement that within 48 hours, people should expect to hear back from whomever they have made a request of. And if it's longer than that, that would be an appropriate time to move along the chain of command. And I know that very often people try to respond within 24 hours, mm-hmm. but if it's longer than 48, that would be a reasonable expectation, that people would call the principal if they haven't heard back from the teacher, or call the superintendent if they haven't heard back from the principal.
Can I just
Yeah, sure.
asking about that particular response, just to clarify, hearing back meaning I received your email or received you, because I think sometimes the expectation is that something's
Right.
resolved, but then, sorry, Jean, you look like you're ready to get up and talk about that.
Jean's got it.
So, taking into consideration the document that Mr. Buckley just referred to has since been revised and will be included in the handbooks. So the final sentences under notes, it says, this is the revision, which you don't have in your packet. It says, at minimum, all communication should be acknowledged within 24 hours with respect to receipt of the communication. Parents and community members should be advised that their communication is important and will be addressed as soon as possible. So parents need to be responded to, or any community member acknowledge we've received your email within 24 hours. We've shortened that time period. And then depending upon the nature of the issue, it may be more than 48 hours to resolve it, but at least the communication and continued communication regarding the issue will be the expectation.
Right, so we're putting in something about, we're beginning the process of
Yes.
looking into, so people understand that it's not just sitting there, we're receiving.
Exactly.
It does take a while. you know,
Exactly.
Work involved in the process.
Right. We also revised the one about email communication to indicate that, again, if parents and teachers determine that their desirable form of communication is email, that receipt of email will be responded to within 24 hours, and that the resolution of that will be addressed as soon as possible.
Ms. Goetz?
How does it work with out of office? Now, I know this hopefully doesn't happen that often, but say a teacher gets the flu or something. Presumably most parents would know the teacher was out, but if a parent's emailing a teacher and, I mean, in a professional environment, a lot of times you put out of office on,
Right.
so you would indicate, but assuming somebody was sick or something and that didn't get through, I just wanted to give some thought to, does an out of office like stop the clock ticking? So the parent knows, okay, well, look, there's unusual circumstances here. This person's traveling for professional development or at a seminar, so they might need a little more time to say, hey, you know, you don't want to have to, your teachers who are sick have to be checking on email every second. That's just not reasonable either.
Right.
So I would personally like that if there's an out of office or some sort of indication that there's some problem that parents know, just give them a little more time.
Sure.
So.
Mrs. Gallivan?
I guess with that, along with the changes that the administration is proposing, that we're in the developing stage. Like, in other words, that sounds good to me, but I've heard it for the first time, haven't seen it in writing yet, and I might have a thought tomorrow morning, or somebody listening to our meeting might say, well, have you considered this, this, and this? So in other words, now is the time for everybody to just sort of start to begin to take notes and say, okay, how do you want to handle when the teacher's out? Or, you know, there are the exceptions, but it's just, I think, our intention to make sure that people know that we're not just saying, yeah, we're listening. We're beginning to put actions into place, and they're not all buttoned up right at the moment, which is fine. But because you're right, you know, there are times when people are out and it's completely out of, you know, completely unexpected that they would be answering email that day.
And you don't want administrators sitting at professional development feeling like they have to be tied to their devices. There's nothing worse than our society being tied to their device to the point where they're not present. So I don't want to be encouraging that people are so worried about getting dinged for not immediately getting back to somebody that they're not paying attention at something, or, you know, if they're sick and they need
No.
time to recover. So that's why I'm
Those are
saying
the exceptions.
that should, like,
Right.
stop the clock,
But
kind of.
I think we're developing, you know, a better process, and I think that that's worth considering. I think a typical day for administrator, they should check their emails in the morning, and they should check them at the end of the day, but be present with everything else in between. I think that's reasonable.
Ms. Virginie?
Do we not have like an auto reply?
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
That you can really,
that's what I would ideally like
yeah,
to see.
I would say then you
Yeah.
can really, like I know at work,
They go out.
it's one thing if you're out for the day and then you can say that would be, but then if you know you're out, like say it's an injury, God forbid, or something, and then you have the secondary person you would contact, here's the person to contact in my absence if it's something urgent, so that automatically goes, so it's
Right.
pretty easy to do, but it'd be important that people think about when they're setting it up, who
Yep.
it is to contact,
We have
so,
that option.
yeah, okay.
Further thoughts on that? Excellent. Mrs. Gallivan?
Not so much related to communication, but just in general, before we move on to the other stuff. I just think that it's important to thank all the people who've contributed their time and their ideas so far. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and even this morning, met a friend whose kids are a little bit older than I am, and she was almost sort of saying, it's too bad that you have to deal with this. And I said, you know, I really think that it's an opportunity to help kids who are struggling. And I think that it's important for us to embrace it that way. And I think we've gotten some really good input from people over the summertime. And I truly feel that, like, what's important now is to put actions behind it. And I know that I'm speaking for my colleagues when I say this. During the summer months, we talked about all sorts of things, received a lot of suggestions, heard about things that haven't worked well and some things that really do work well. The one piece of skepticism that I keep hearing is people want to see that we're moving to the action stage. So during the month of September, we're going to have subcommittee meetings. And I don't know whether I'm taking a part that you want to do, Bill, but I think...
No, but we would love to remind everyone, if you have yet, who is part of it, if you have yet to indicate which subcommittee you're on. Bridget is giving the almost time's up sign.
Yep.
That it's really important. I think we have a pretty robust email list that's working on this, and we want to be respectful of folks' time, get doodle polls out there, make sure the most people possible can attend these. And so the planning begins really Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So if you have yet to do so, we welcome and hope that you can join us in that.
Right, and what I wanted to say is, people may feel like they have some ideas and they don't really have time to attend. We're still accepting ideas.
Absolutely.
And it's 4 different areas. One is communication. We're talking about expanding existing methods, setting up expectations for timely school-to-parent communication, improving our website, sharing social-emotional training between school and parents, and creating a more user-friendly bullying resource for families. If you have any thoughts on that, join the subcommittee or just send us your ideas. The next area is the plans, the protocols, and the expectations that Walpole Public Schools expects everyone to follow in the cases of bullying, harassment, assault, injuries, violence, or verbal aggressive student discipline type issues. This group may also want to talk about how to intervene earlier on with kids in younger grades, even if it's not an extreme issue. But that's the plans, protocols, and expectations group. Then there's another group for data reporting, and that group will look into questions related to student discipline reports on the state website, and will recommend potential improvements in local reporting to help families feel satisfied that students' safety concerns are being taken seriously, regardless of whether or not they meet the threshold for state reporting. And the 4th area is parent-student school group. This group will give feedback for all anti-bullying parent programs that will be offered. It'll provide similar input on student leadership development and curriculum, and will seek guidance from nearby towns that have already established groups to support the schools with social emotional development of children. Again, give us your ideas or join the committee, but as Bill just said, we're going to start putting out information to have the first meetings very soon. So if you are listening to us tonight, join in. And I just wanted to mention on the parent-student school group, we got a really thoughtful proposal from one of the high school students who had put in a great deal of time. And I think it's a great beginning roadmap for part of the work that'll be done. You know, it's important for us to convey that we're taking this seriously, and we've got some good ideas going.
Very good. And again, just to continually beat a dead horse, that the best way to reach us is our group email that goes to all 7 of us, which is really, I know for me, I like having something. We were just talking before the meeting about all the paper I have as a millennial, which is uncommon, but I love to have something concrete and in writing that is really helpful for our deliberations on any number of matters. Mrs. Gallivan. Or,
So
Mrs.
Yeah,
Matee?
go ahead, you guys, and then I'll
No,
come
just
back.
as far as that goes too, I think sometimes I don't know if there's a miscommunication, misperception that when it comes to us, that we're all going to answer
Right.
that, and so I just kind of wanted to clarify that. I mean, it doesn't, usually the chairperson answers it, is
Mhm.
my understanding, but it doesn't mean that we're not all reading it and paying
Right.
attention to it and bringing it up in meetings, but we aren't all
Yeah.
going to answer it
Mhm.
with 7 different responses. We try to
Exactly.
have a unified response, so.
And nor do sometimes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
or-
Nor does it have to necessarily be something response-worthy. You can just, hey, I really think, I have great concerns about the quality of Johnson Middle School or Bird Middle School, and it's the capital, and that's helpful for us.
But we are reading it,
we are
thinking
reading it,
about
yeah.
it and paying attention to it.
Absolutely. Ms. Gallagher.
I just had 2 little ideas. One on I think we should do more to advertise school committee at Walpole.
Yep.
Walpole.k12.ma.us. I'm thinking maybe like even as our meetings are starting, if we put it right below the seal, just so that people see it more. I think it's not necessarily something that most people know about. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is we're doing a survey.
Yes.
And
we're gonna get to that.
I believe that that's coming out on Tuesday.
Mhm.
And that's also to set up the baseline of getting feedback from everybody. Even if you don't have time to send us an email about anything related to specific ideas, we purposefully made the survey less than 10 minutes long, and we would really encourage people to take that 10 minutes and give us some feedback so that we get a good representative group of people responding.
So that pretty much covers the survey portion of this discussion, but we initially thought we were gonna send it out to everybody the first day of school, but in retrospect, we know many parents get a lot of email the first few days of school, so we picked Tuesday after the break as a time for that to go out to all of our parents, K-12 in the Walpole Public Schools, and we really do, it's important for us to get the data out of that, and as we talk about the more data that we can have for our deliberations, it's important for us to hear from folks to see how many of you feel a given way on a number of the topics. We did pretty extensive research in the production of the survey. We're quite proud of it, and we're just really excited for another mechanism to hear back from the community, from the parents as well. A third piece to this school safety initiative is the personnel we've put into place to address student safety and social emotional needs over the past few years, and we thought this at the beginning of school committee this beginning of school year meeting would be a good place to really maybe present that to the wider community that may not be aware of the things we have done and the interventions we have taken in the past few years. So Dr. Lynch does have a list of that.
Yes, so some of the questions that came up in the groups were what staff have been added in the past few years. So we've added 2 additional counselors at the elementary level. They help out with problem areas like recess and cafeteria, as well as now we have a counselor in each elementary school, so the kids get more attention from the counselor. This year we've added a school psychologist to the middle school, so we have 1 psychologist in each school. That'll also give that individual more time to work one-on-one with kids. Last year we added a high school counselor to drop the ratios to give more access to children and students to counselors. We redirected a school social worker from a separate program into overall work within the district. The Walpole Police Department has added a second school resource officer and a dog, Comfort Dog and Rebel. But the school resource officer is in a soft uniform. He works with kids on potential issues they may be having or trauma within their homes. He also has been a great resource to train our staff and how to deal with conflict and other issues, as well as any emergencies. We've added hours to playground aides, playground and cafeteria aides at the cafeteria. And the cafeterias, identifying that those are problem areas where you don't have teachers 1 to 20 or 1 to 25, you have large groups of kids. We've added school safety assessment teams made up of professionals from each school, and they will funnel information into Assistant Superintendent's office to create recommendations that go along with the small groups. Right now we have close to 20 staff members who are participating in these small 4 groups on communications, data reporting, bullying intervention plan adjustments, parent-student leader groups. We have about 25 parents who are also signed up, so we're encouraging more parents. We've had a good showing and good interest from our staff, counselors, principals, and teachers. And just this week, we've redirected and rewritten a job description for an instructional aide at the high school. And that high school will be called a student support liaison. And it'll be specifically to deal with, as a job description, be specifically to deal with student conflict resolution, behavior modifications, academic supports, data entry and analysis, attendance monitoring, parent communication, and other effective communication. So this position will assist our assistant principals and our principal in dealing with this issue, and also to follow up with kids. So let's say that a kid experiences trauma in their home, and we know about it. Before anything, a student may act out as a result of that. We want to assign a person to that student to come in and talk to them and to work issues out, or to refer them to to other professionals within the building. So that looks like about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 additional staff to deal with the peer aggression, bullying, and conflict. And I think if this model works at the high school, we'll move this model down to the middle schools very soon. And I thank Principal Imbush for coming up with this concept. Another position I'm looking at through the budgets process would be a centralized person to work in my office, to also be a liaison for students and for parents when it comes to all of these issues and all of these concerns, in addition to our assistant superintendent, myself, the principals, assistant principals. But I think with all the educational initiatives and dealing with 4,200 kids on a daily basis and over 7,000 parents, I think we're spreading our administrators too thin. We don't have assistant principals at the elementary school, and I think we need to continue to look at what type of support we can provide our administrative team, because it seems to be, there is a very heightened expectation for immediate resolutions, and it's difficult when a principal is evaluating teachers, they're dealing with other students, they're dealing with the building and infrastructure, to immediately jump on these issues. Yet if we have people that will be able to assist to get right out in front of these issues and help with the communication and the effectiveness and the follow-up, that's so important, the follow-up and the prevention. That's a direction we need to go.
Mr. Breed?
So, King Philip, where I teach, and I don't know what the title is, but we've effectively had what the staff considers a third assistant principal for 4 or 5 years now, which sounds to me exactly what this position is.
Right. And that position, I've heard evidence that person has prevented some altercations within the high school, that they had their ears to the ground, that they were dealing with students who were dealing with some difficult issues, and they were able to nip things in the bud before any fights broke out or before there was an altercation. Most of what we deal with are snap altercations. They're at the high school, we have a lot of issues with boyfriends, girlfriends, relationships, jealousies, crimes of passion. Even at this level, it's very prevalent. And, and a lot of what happens on social media is spilling back into the schools, and it's something that we're constantly trying to catch up to. Social media can be a wonderful tool for kids, but it can also be a forum where people can be vicious to each other. People can come to conclusions without having all the facts and immediately make comments online that they can't erase, that they can't hold back, they can't pull back once they've had time to think about it. And it causes conflict. It causes conflict not only with adults in the community, but it also causes conflict with our students. And then that spills into the schools. So however we can work with parents to work on these issues, we're more than welcome to listen to suggestions. Our principals work very hard. They're highly trained. Can we do more training? We will. We had a speaker in Tuesday to talk to the entire staff at a staff meeting. And it was all about the social and emotional learning and how do you foresee, how do you prevent conflict that turns into altercations, that turn into eventually bullying if it's repeated and there's an imbalance of power. So it's a very difficult social issue that we're trying to address head on with your help and with the community's help.
Jeannie?
I just had a quick question. Jean might be the one to answer it. Some people have asked me about the roles, say, at the high school. It's great to see the additional personnel. But if, understanding what the role of the social worker or the counselor is, in other words, could a student make a regular appointment for a period of time? Is it more of a drop-in? Do they do a specific piece of work?
With this individual?
No.
Oh, no,
Just
with
the
the
regular, with the counselors, because
Yeah,
some
the
people are
counsel-
unclear if it's, like there's a problem, let's resolve it, or if it's a kid who has an ongoing depression or anxiety, or
Ye-
how they make an appointment.
Yeah.
People aren't
Well, a
really
lot of times the
clear.
teachers will identify problems with kids and changes of behavior, and they'll talk to the counselors who will reach out to the kids, or a parent will call a counselor. But as soon, or a student will go to the counselor. And if that counselor can't handle the issue, that topic, that problem, they will direct them, or they'll call in additional help from, say, Riverside Counseling, or any number of resources. Charlie Farrell just put together a planner for every student. He published it. And within that planner, there are resources, an SOS email, anonymous email that the kids can send in, that I know that Tommy is having an issue with X. Can you check in on him? We also have Safe Schools email that parents can use. We should publicize that more, I think, again, to the communication.
I'm just saying beyond the safe school, so could someone make, this parent asked me in particular, can they make
Sure.
a regular appointment?
Absolutely.
Like a weekly appointment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We encourage that.
And that would happen when? Like during their study, or how could it be arranged?
Could be after school.
There's a homeroom period each morning. It could happen then. It could happen during lunch. We have an adjustment counselor / social worker at the high school, Marie Doherty. We have 2 other social workers at the high school, a school psychologist, and we have 5 school counselors. Our school nurses are also trained in counseling. Many of them have taken courses. So the opportunity for having a regular appointment, whether it's weekly or once per cycle, that's appropriate, but drop-in is also encouraged. A lot of our counselors at the high school, social workers, adjustment counselors, also meet regularly for lunch with students, particularly students who have difficulty in the cafeteria and don't necessarily have a specific person that they want to or can sit with. I know a lot of the students have said they feel that there's a stigma to sit specifically with a counselor or a school psychologist. So often what will happen is they'll go to the nurse, and then the nurse will make a referral, and then there'll be a quiet meeting that is not necessarily observed by everyone else. So the real advice to a parent is to call. Every student is assigned a counselor. Marie Doherty, the adjustment counselor, is always available and consults with all the counselors. So they can call the counseling office. Mrs. McCann is the secretary there, and she will direct the call to the most appropriate person and then go from there.
Thanks.
Mr. Brady?
Yeah, my experience is that I routinely get an email from somebody that says so-and-so was with me. That implies that it was a drop-in. Or the student might have me sign a pass for, if they're gonna miss class instead of a study hall, that they're gonna be gone with my permission, or sometimes it'll just be I'm notified that they're gonna be gone. So it's depending on the need. And I would think that it would take class time as well if it's a priority.
Yeah.
Especially depending upon
Yeah.
the degree of need.
There are routines, as I guess what
Yeah,
you're saying.
I think she was, I think there's a difference sometimes between guidance and they're focusing a lot on college and courses and different things, that she was looking for really mental health counseling once a week, for a period of time.
Mrs. Gallagher?
In my experience, it seems like sometimes the kids have an opinion that, especially if it's a boy, they might prefer to see Charlie Farrow. And I'm not, over stereotyping, but, I think that it's very appropriate for them to reach out to the individual if they know them a little bit. But it sounds like what Jean is saying is the guidance counselor or Marie Doherty as the adjustment counselor or Charlie Farrow as the psychologist are all appropriate people.
Yeah.
If they know them, maybe, but, I don't know. Like, one of them's in the transition program, so that might be something that somebody would choose.
Anything further? Seeing none, Mr. Fisher, you're back. We'll now move on to the capital improvements that are related to our school's safety initiative.
So in your packet, you have a list of items. I wrote a few more details just to give you some background. I think would be appropriate to answer some of the questions, or at least give you a background on some of the concerns that you had earlier. So these are capital improvements, not necessarily capital funded, but capital improvements for 2018. So at the high school, this was capital funded from last capital cycle. We added 7 additional cameras providing recorded surveillance both inside and outside of the school. I'm going to be a little vague here for obvious reasons. At JMS, we added additional indoor and outdoor cameras providing front entrance recorded surveillance, new access control for the front door with 3 desktop monitors and control buttons for 2 secretaries and the building principal, 22-inch HD flat screen monitor to replace the original black and white low definition monitor. Couldn't think of a better term to describe that old one. Old Post Road, we added additional front entrance camera and a 22-inch HD flat screen monitor again. In addition, I'm just thinking of Bridget here, we added this same setup to Byrd Middle School last year as well, outside of capital funding. So those were capital funded items. The other additional one was the phone system that we talked about earlier. We did replace the phone system at Byrd, and as you know, Old Post Road is on the docket for this year as well. In a prior capital round, and I think Link had this on his list in your packets, we replaced all of the lock sets at Byrd Middle School. There were some concerns, so they've all been replaced by Donnie Anderson's team. So I'm going to cost these out too at the end, just to give you a perspective dollar-wise. We then assembled outside of capital emergency go bags, we call them. They're emergency backpacks provided for each classroom and common space in all 7 buildings. Packs include a variety of gear for emergency situations. So not just a lockdown, but for a fire drill, for when you have to leave the classroom, when you have an emergency within the classroom, first aid-wise, those packs have everything. They should be located by the door so that subs, people that aren't traditionally in that classroom, are aware of where the bags can be if they need them. Tom Hart, our SRO, came in and did training on the bags when we initially rolled them out at staff meetings for principals. So people are familiar with the items in there. I think I wasn't there when Tom was there, but I know we talked about this. Improvising is important. So that was some of the kind of lessons with beyond just having the bag in your classroom. I hope that you've heard at this point, but all the two-way radios are going to be replaced in our buildings. That's over 100 digital two-way radios for daily and emergency communication. Digital radio significantly improve the quality and range of communication. That's critical at the high school. In particular, repeaters will allow communication between buildings and with the Walpole Police Department. We also added an addition of 2 panic buttons in each school building that connect directly to the Walpole Police Department dispatcher console. This project was developed and funded in collaboration with Walpole Public Schools and the Walpole Police Department. I went and presented with the help of police officers and Don Anderson on this topic to the Permanent Building Committee because it was related to the police station funding, and they agreed to fund this. The two-way radio should be in about 2 weeks in every building. The panic buttons will be installed around the same time. The final item I have on here is the enrollment into the ALICE program. Walpole Schools recently joined the ALICE Emergency Program and will be undergoing training for all teachers in collaboration with the Walpole Police Department. This program better enables staff to make appropriate decisions in emergency situations. So when you take these items and you add them up, I don't know, I was actually surprised when I sat down and added them up because I never had done that before, and I came up to $200,000 in 2018 that we spent on security-related capital infrastructure. I'm not saying it solves all our problems. Obviously, you heard about staffing is critical as well. But $200,000 is a lot of investment into school safety, and it doesn't solve all our problems. There are still things that we want to do, but I think it shows historically our concern with safety in our buildings in general.
These are great. You know, just back to Jen's question about surveillance in certain areas, and I know like we can't put a camera in the locker room and bathroom for privacy issues, but I don't expect I'm not looking for an immediate response, but just something to think about as we go along, because they tend to be problematic areas, locker rooms and bathrooms, for fighting or bullying, but also too the whole vaping thing, which seems just so prevalent in the bathrooms. And I think that's a safety that could come under the safety umbrella. So just thinking about what we can do to make those safer places.
Okay.
Anybody see that YouTube video of the electronic vaping thing blow up in some guy's pocket the other day? That was,
I didn't see it recently, but I've
But
seen
yeah,
But there's
things.
been
Yeah,
others.
absolutely.
Right, there's lots of
Absolutely.
things, right.
just throwing it out there. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. You might as well stay up there, Mike. MSBA.
SBA.
Do you want to introduce him?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Do we need a motion?
Yeah.
Did we already ask? Okay, for the exact article. Fair enough. So, the secondary school building study, the MSBA has informed the school district that they plan to visit both Byrd Middle School and Johnson Middle School on Tuesday, September 25th, which we are exceedingly happy about. Both of those schools are over 60 years old, and we're excited for the MSBA and their staff to take a look at those, as they have already taken a look at the high school 2
Correct.
years ago now.
Yes.
This body on August the 3rd did request a town meeting to hold in advance $1.5 million for a school feasibility study. And we did testify before the Capital Budget Committee on that $1.5 million study, which approved would deal with feasibility and schematic design. It is a study that is reimbursable through the MSBA, 40 or 50%, if we do it after being invited in. So the thought is to park that money so that when, if we are invited in, which is a timeline of possibly December,
December 15th.
we don't have to wait all the way until May for that money to be allocated, which would give Walpole about a 6-month jump to get the study done. And I know the contents of the study will be, for a community like ours, which is so civically engaged, it'll be a great building block for the dialogue that will happen afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want to do preliminary timeline again? Or?
So the timeline would be Tuesday night, the Capital Improvement Committee will vote to either support or not the recommendation. Then it will go to the Finance Committee and then the town meeting. The town meeting would vote to transfer free cash to pay for this, to park for the study, and the expenditure would be contingent upon MSBA inviting the town into the grant program. Being invited into the grant program, they will cover the cost of the feasibility study. If the state and the town can't come to terms with an appropriate option that's educationally sound and economical, then the MSBA doesn't guarantee that they would fund a school, but they've funded every invitee since the program began. So it's a good, you have a good chance, almost 100% chance, if you work with them and you look at enough options. So the options we would like to study would be a new high school and move the existing middle school into the high school, where you would have 3 grades, where you now have 4, so you would overcome a lot of overcrowding and create additional space. And you would build a new high school, and you would retire the 2 buildings or renovate and add to those buildings. So you would look at that, or you would look at building 1 new consolidated middle school, or 2 new middle schools, or renovating. Another option would be to renovate both middle schools, or remodel both middle schools, or put additions on to those schools or the high school. So there's a lot of options on the table, and there's really, the only limit to the options is how much you want to pay with respect to having a professional come in and do the study. The study would also look at any proposed sites that may be not in school possession now. They would have to vet all of that, just so that those questions are answered, any land available. They would look at the existing land to see if they would be adequate for the building you'd like to put on that space, on that location. We would also look at enrollments and do long-term enrollment projections, because it's very important to have the enrollment number nailed down, because the enrollment drives square footage, cost per square foot drives the total grant, and then the grant percentage is a percentage of that total cost. So if it's a $100 million building, hypothetically speaking, then the state would pay a certain amount per square foot, and then a percentage of that. So if the state approves $350 per square foot for construction and furnishing and equipment, they would then pay 40, 45, whatever that number is that they settle on for Walpole based on the socioeconomics of Walpole. The money from the state comes from 1 cent on the sales tax. It's dedicated to school facilities. They usually spend $600 million in startup costs per year. So they have done, I think, over $2 billion, $2.5 billion worth of schools. It's quite an extraordinary program, and it's a model across the country. So again, this whole proposal is to park money and have it available in December if the state invites the town in, which we hope they will. And then we're looking at a 9 to 12 month study throughout 2019. And then you have to evaluate the study. You have to come to an agreement on a preferred option as a community. And you have, by about 2020, about a year later, approximately, you hope to have an agreement with MSBA that they will fund a percentage of the program of the building or renovations. So I think the earliest that you would see a shovel in the ground would be 2020, 2021. And then you're looking at 2 years for construction and moving and final punch list. So you're looking at 2022 before you occupy new space. Sometimes new construction goes quicker than renovations because you don't have hidden conditions that you have to deal with. Sometimes construction is held up by environmental issues. So there's a lot that can happen during this whole complex process. But we're hoping that these expanded facilities will give the teachers and the parents an ability to embrace 21st century teaching and learning, where you have spaces for collaborations, as most businesses do, and most businesses are calling for kids who can collaborate with colleagues as well as solve complex problems. It'll also give flexibility for project-based learning so that different disciplines can work together on long-term projects, integrating technology and research, etc. So, we're not asking you to spend money tonight, we're asking you to request that Capital Finance Committee and eventually the town meeting members vote to set aside the money for an expense contingent upon acceptance into the grant program. So that's where we stand tonight, and I have a motion that we could read that is very similar or maybe exact to what will be read at town meeting. The only modifications may be town council at the last minute, or I'll send it off to MSBA for vetting too, but I did have conversations with them, and I've incorporated all their requirements in this motion.
Mr. Breen?
I'd like to read that motion after Ms. Gayosa.
I just wanted to change on line 5, and this is what happens when you have an attorney on your committee.
Yep.
It should say address a lack of learning instead of lack
Oh,
or.
it's a typo.
Thank you.
Good catch.
Good typo catch.
You have that?
Very good.
Excellent.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that the school committee petition the town to see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for a feasibility study to be expended contingent upon invitation into the Massachusetts School Building Authority grant program and designed to address a lack of learning and collaboration areas and overcrowding at the secondary school buildings, and shall include but not be limited to providing options for the renovation or remodeling of existing buildings and or new construction of buildings or additions, or recommending any other options found to be educationally appropriate and cost-effective at or all of Byrd Middle School, 625 Washington Street, and or Johnson Middle School, 111 Robbins Road, and or Walpole High School, 275 Common Street, for which feasibility study the town may be eligible for an MSBA grant, and that the grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any costs the town incurs in connection with the feasibility study in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, or take any action in relation thereto. This is a petition of the school committee.
Do I have a second? Ms. Gayotis, I have a motion by Mr. Breen, a second by Ms. Gayotis. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
Thank you.
Can you just add a couple of things?
Mrs. Gallivan?
I just wanted to explain some of the pieces that the superintendent didn't cover. This feasibility study will be wide range, it'll be very inclusive, it'll include a lot of opportunity for community input. And the MSBA requires us to look at repairing, renovating, or replacing. That's a basic. So when we talk about other things we might want to explore, we must start with the repair, renovate, or replace. It came up at the capital budget meeting the other night that people were unclear. We still have 3 statement of interests that are all intersecting with each other, because we've made the case that we're concerned about our 2 middle schools and our high school. People were not clear, but we're following through with the 3 statement of interests. And the good news is, after the end of this month, the MSBA will have looked at all 3 buildings. A feasibility study is really a package deal. It causes you to explore all of your options. It brings some independent people who are experts across the state in this field to give us advice. They will give us financial estimates to help us be able to evaluate options. And what they will help the group do is narrow down the choices to one recommended choice. They'll create schematic designs for that recommended choice, and the schematic designs are 25% of the architectural designs, and it gives you an actual cost estimate for the project that you then bring forward. So I think it's important for people to understand that it's not just helping us talk through all of our choices. It's bringing the experts who can help us, especially to begin to put dollars with some of these costs.
Right.
Because renovating is something that people don't realize. Once you hit a certain threshold of renovating, you have to bring the whole building up to code. So they'll be able to help us a lot with the financial part of it.
Right, and they will produce documents that will be ready for bid.
Right.
So once the option is settled on, it'll be their responsibility within this price to create bid documents.
And I think it's just really important for people to know that we've taken this conversation about as far as we can without bringing in experts. And we intend to be very, very community-oriented moving forward and seek input from as many people as possible. Thank you.
Moving on to tours. of
Okay.
public school buildings.
Historically, we've had tours prior to the opening of school. I've adjusted that a bit to have the first tour Thursday night, September 20th. I'm hoping we'll get more people interested in touring our facilities. We'll start at 7 p.m. and then we'll have a second tour for those who would like to tour during the day on Friday, September 21st at 9 a.m. I would prefer that people come at 9 a.m. only because you'll see the students actually in the school. You'll see the high school and understand why we're saying we have overcrowding at the high school with corridors and cafeteria usage, etc. You'll see, especially the finance committee will see why we have special education programs and why we have low staffing ratios in those classrooms. It just helps when people normally think, why do you have a class size of 8? Well, there's reasons for that. And I think it also it'll help to show the actual functioning of a building. And I'm hoping that we get a high turnout. We'll be inviting, obviously, school committee, capital committee, finance committee, and the board of selectmen. Questions?
That was my question.
Anyone else?
just-
Ms. Muccini?
It's not a question, but one of the first comments my son made to me as a new freshman is, I cannot believe the crowds in the hallways at the high school. I can't get through, so.
Yeah.
I know what you mean firsthand. It was just funny. He really noticed that. It's hard to get to his class on time.
Yep. School operations report? May I, Mr. Chairman?
It's all you, man.
Okay.
Sure, boy.
So, first item in your packet is the personnel update. You'll see that whenever you have a large staff, you have turnover, you have retirements, you have resignations. We also have transfers within the district, and hopefully we have people engaged within our district and looking at career trajectory within our district, which is important. Give them opportunities for leadership. We also have transitions with students graduating and other students coming in with different needs. So you'll see we have 73 different changes of staffing. Not all new people, but either transfers or replacements or adjustments. So that's in your packet. I'd also like to address the last two early release days and just say briefly that when I look at early release days for these 2 days, I looked at temperatures in our buildings that are not air conditioned. I look at the third floor, for example, the social studies wing at the high school, where the temperatures reached about 100 degrees. No less, the heat index was even higher, around 107, 108. And what was very important, unlike maybe next week where the temperatures will drop to the 60s at night, where we can open the windows and cool off the buildings at night, we didn't have that opportunity, that luxury this year. So the buildings were hot during the day and it was hot at night, and they were hot the next day, and they were like greenhouses. All the glass and the heat, and you have 4,000 kids in these buildings and the activity. So I felt it was much safer for children, that they could endure a certain amount of hours, but not a full day. And secondly, the buses that were pulling into our yards were over 100 degrees in the buses. They are not air conditioned. Maybe in the south you have air conditioned schools, or you have buses with white roofs that reflect the sun that are air conditioned, but in the north our buses are not air conditioned, generally speaking. So those were the major factors, and I know it inconveniences some parents who work, and I apologize for that, but we have to make decisions that are in the common good and are in the best interest of all children. So I hope people understand.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, we have subcommittee activity. On our August 3rd meeting, we did do a first reading of subcommittee assignments. If anyone would like a change, have any thoughts on that? Are people happy where they are?
Sure.
Would the committee like to codify these assignments? Is that traditional? Do we just, okay, fair enough then. You're all staying where you are then.
Maybe we could, Mr. Chairman, maybe we could consider renaming, like, say, the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Could we somehow encapsulate the,
Well, that's an actual committee.
That's a committee in town.
oh, so that's like a liaison that serves on that committee?
Correct.
These are all liaisons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to assign, though, someone to help with the buildings and the secondary school building study? Someone on the school? Do you want to form a subcommittee for that, or do you feel that
We haven't really
We're
talked
okay?
about
I
those
think
specifics.
that's an
That's a
interesting
separate-
discussion.
Yeah,
down the road?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just a
talk about-
thought.
think about that.
All right, great.
All right,
Thank you.
till next time. Any citizens have comments? Any at all? Seeing none? Ms. Ira?
All right, I would like to make a motion to approve the payroll warrants from July 26th, warrant number S904A, from August 9th, S906A, and from August 23rd, S908A, for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Sarek, the second by Ms. Gaotz. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable warrants from August 2nd, 219005, and from August 9th, 219006, from the 23rd, 219008, and from August 30th, 219009, for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Sarek, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. We have no gifts today, so if people are feeling generous in the viewing audience, the school district would be happy to take you up on your generosity. Approval of minutes. The regular meeting minutes for June 18th and executive session minutes were approved at our August 2nd school committee meeting. So I need a motion to approve our July 18th school committee minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Breen,
Second.
second by Ms. Muccini. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
For the record, that was July 12th, did you say?
Fair
July
enough.
18th?
You guys did teach me how to read. July 12th, 2018. A vote to approve August 2nd, 2018 school committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Mr. Breen,
Motion. Pardon me.
second by Ms. Muccini. End of the night. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600. We do not have a requirement, a need for executive session this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion by Mr. Breen, second by Ms. Gaotz. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 600. Good night.
somebody take that